Hey, what's going on? This is Danny Cunningham. You are listening to Campus Pressbox, episode number 36. I'm joined by fellow Notre Dame writer Ben Belden, as well as special guest and Notre Dame graduate Dan Fox. What's going on, gentlemen?
Hey, what's up?
Doing well.
All right, let's get right into it. Obviously, we are very thankful that Dan was able to join us tonight. We really appreciate it. Have some questions for him as far as comparisons between the famous 2012 season that he was a part of and the current season now, what he's up to now, and some other things as far as college football goes. But let's start it off with, obviously you were a big part of the 2012 season, Dan. What was your favorite memory from that year?
My favorite memory from that year, man, there's so many good ones. I don't know. I think maybe Stanford was a huge game, and then winning out at USC to send us to the national championship. Those were two big points that stick out in my mind from that season.
Yeah, I definitely remember where I was when both of those happened, and both of those kind of lead me to follow-up questions there. How early did that whistle blow on the fourth down play in overtime against Stanford, first of all?
Man, I don't even know. I actually wasn't in on that specific play, but I understand there was some controversy, and I could see both sides of the argument. But I mean, he was stopped pretty solidly. I don't know how much time you need to be stopped like that, but I think it was a fair play.
Yeah, to me, granted, I was a junior in college at that time, sitting there having just put down a couple cold ones myself, screaming at the TV, and I'm pretty sure he was stopped, like his forward progress was stopped about twice before he stretched it across. So I remember sitting there watching that replay, though, thinking, oh man, like eventually he does get that ball across, but how many chances does he get at it? But
right.
Yeah, that was a crazy. As soon as Danny started talking about that season, that's one of the iconic images I think from that season, even as a fan also. So that's kind of sweet that you, I don't know, you said that exact instance for sure.
Yeah.
And actually, it's funny you bring that up because I was at the Notre Dame Wake Forest game this past weekend, and that stand was the picture on the tickets. So that's actually pretty funny that you bring that up. And then my second question, as far as memory goes, were you around the guys in the locker room that were sending tweets at Rick Riley as soon as you guys beat USC?
No, but I definitely saw him. That was pretty sweet to be told that you're irrelevant, and then to go to the national championship was that was a really, really cool feeling.
Yeah, I would have to imagine. What was it like playing in the national championship game? Obviously, all eyes are on you almost every week when you're playing at Notre Dame, with playing all your games on national TV and really being in one of the centers of the college football world. But playing in the national title game had to be such a crazy experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like surreal when I go back and think about it, just running out onto the field and just that feeling of, this is the national championship. I'm about to go start at linebacker and play. Like, it was honestly surreal. The game didn't turn out as we'd hoped, but
yeah,
it was still the whole experience of going and just being able to play on that stage was just something unforgettable.
Yeah, as you were saying this, I'm thinking I gotta ask. Obviously, there was like that surreal feeling before the game. How long did it take for that to because I mean, we honestly kind of got punched in the mouth by Alabama pretty quick. How long did it take before it kind of got to that? Holy crap! Like what's going on here? Was it instantaneous almost?
Yeah. I think it was the first contact with Eddie Lacy that kind of put me back to where exactly I was and what I need to be doing.
Right. Is he probably one of the best backs you think you've faced? Obviously, he's still doing well today, so he turned out all right. But
yeah, he was definitely he had a whole combo of speed and power that was kind of that I saw in a couple guys in college, but really nothing like that.
Right.
Who was the best player that you think you played against in college? If, in your opinion, who was the best guy?
I played against?
Yes.
That's a tough question. I played against so many good guys.
We can also say best guy you played with as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of offensive talent, I think of, I just think playing Michigan and Jannard Robinson, him at quarterback, I know he doesn't have like a real illustrious NFL career going, but I mean, in college, the guy was a dynamic athlete. Like he could make the throws when necessary, but he could also run the ball. He would run the ball with the ball up like he's going to throw it. So you don't know if he's going to throw it, pitch it, keep it. So he was just a dynamic athlete. I think Andrew Luck was a great player in college offensively. And I also think, Tyler Eifert and Michael Floyd, just two guys that I played with that were just offensive beasts.
Yeah, Tyler's having himself quite a year this year, which is great to see. I was happy when Gresham left Cincinnati, and I picked Eifert pretty high in fantasy football. I'm not going to lie, thinking that this could be the year, and I was glad I was right. And even being a Browns fan, it's fun watching Eifert score touchdowns out there. I must admit. And then watching Michael Floyd on Sunday Night Football the other night was pretty cool.
Yeah, he went off.
That was great. I love that guy. So.
Yeah, it's great to see a lot of ND guys doing really well in the NFL, and obviously you had the privilege of playing with a ton of talent, which had to be really special.
Oh yeah. I mean, you that's what you get at Notre Dame. You get the best guys from high school and the best athletes from around the country. So, there's just a ton of talent on the team, and that's pretty true with the team that we have now. I mean, all the guys that get hurt, and it's really just next man in. I mean, Deshaun Kaiser comes in. Michael Wilbon, I think, said he was one of the best players in the country. He should win a Heisman. So, I mean, this kid wasn't thinking he was going to see the field at all this year. That's just a testament to recruiting at Notre Dame and the type of athlete you get.
Yeah, I did see those comments by Michael Wilbon, which really, really shocked me because he's such a Big Ten guy and a Northwestern guy and not really thought of as a pro Notre Dame guy. And talking about Kaiser, it's crazy to think he was barely getting any reps in the spring because he was so buried on that depth chart behind Golson and Zaire. Now he's got Notre Dame at 9-1, potentially fighting for a playoff spot.
Yeah, that's college football, though. I mean, guy goes down. You can't go sign another guy. You got to work with what you got.
Yeah, very true. And that leads me to my next question. What kind of similarities and differences do you see between now and back when you were there?
Well, it's a different defensive coordinator. I had Coach Bob Diaco. And so he's the head coach at UConn now. So there's a new D coordinator there. And so I think that's a little bit different. They run a little bit different defense. And I think, when comparing the run that we made in 2012, it's just a little bit different as far as I felt like, the backbone was really the defense. We were number one going into the national championship. I don't know what the rankings are as far as this team's defense, but I definitely think they're putting up a little bit more points, and it's a little less stout on D, but overall I think the team's just as good. But there's definitely – it's the same attitude, It's that same – they were down in Virginia. That game was – they were all but beat. And to come back and win it at the end, it really reminded me of Pittsburgh. Yeah. When I was in 2012 when we went to triple overtime and they missed that field goal, that's just what happens. You just got no quit in you. So that's definitely a similarity.
Yeah, definitely that same luck of the Irish type of flair that's going on for sure.
Yeah.
That Danny, I'm in a weird position because you're both named Dan, but that Danny and I have picked up on it. It really has that same vibe to it, and it's really. We hope it turns out in a similar fashion, and potentially even a better fashion too. But I've got a quick question for you. So as a kid, okay, so I'm a lifelong Notre Dame fan. My dad's family has all gone to Notre Dame, and as a kid, I can remember going out in the backyard with my boom box and whatnot, and like playing the Notre Dame fight song, and like thinking about like just envisioning that tunnel and like running out onto the field at Notre Dame Stadium. This past weekend at against Wake Forest was the senior day.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about your senior day and what that was like, and just what your whole experience at Notre Dame kind of was like, and how that culminates into a senior day, and what type of emotions. Because I think this year's Irish team was, I mean, Wake Forest isn't very good, and they were just, I don't want to say flat, but they weren't, I don't know, definitely not the best game they've played all year. So I imagine there's some extra emotions that go into that might have, I don't know, played a part in only, and I say only loosely, beating Wake Forest by 21.
Yeah, I mean, that's an emotional day. It's just your last game in Notre Dame Stadium, and you put in so much work, and I just think about the thing is really playing there was awesome, but I was more just nostalgic because of the feeling of not being able to play with my roommates and my friends anymore. It's a bond you form with your teammates, and obviously the fans who support you through the whole gamut. It's that experience is just something. It's unbelievable. As far as playing on senior day, yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of like I was excited and sad, and I had all these emotions before the game, and then it was kind of like the national championship. After the first hit, I didn't even think about it. I didn't even know what day it was or where I was going. I just knew I was going to play this game right now. So yeah, there was definitely a little bit of emotion going into that game, and this past week they didn't play great, but they got a win, and a win's a win, and on senior day it's really important to get that win. So yeah, that's an awesome feeling to be able to go out with a win as a senior at Notre Dame.
Yeah, it would have to be. I can't imagine how terrible it would feel had it turned out any other way. And I want to get back to kind of the beginning of your career at Notre Dame. What made you go there? I had a bunch of offers. I had probably about 25 or 30 offers. And I was just looking at different schools, and one Notre Dame offered me, though. It was just different. Like, my mom and dad were so excited, and I mean, Coach Weiss was who recruited me and offered me. So I appreciate Coach Weiss. I think he's a great coach. I also like Coach Kelly. He offered me at Cincinnati too, and I visited there. So I had a little bit of a relationship with him before he showed up at Notre Dame. But I just think the number one thing is it's just different, honestly. It's just a different feeling of that history of football and all those national championships and all the great players. And I understand other schools have that, but you don't really know until you go to a game and experience that feeling, and being able to slap the sign and run out of the tunnel is just a different experience than anywhere else in the country. Yeah, and I think your explanation there kind of brings me back to a saying that goes something like, for those who get it, no explanation is necessary, and for those who don't, no explanation will suffice. I think that's kind of the best way to summarize it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the whole experience is just you can't even describe it. I mean, even going to class and being taught by the best professors in the country is just a separate, like, that whole entity itself was just great. So I had an awesome experience there.
Now, I got to ask this, and Danny and I talked about this before you came on about whether we were even going to ask this question or not, but I think we've segued nicely into it. So preparing for this podcast, I Google searched, and one of the first things that comes up when you Google search Dan Fox is your Wikipedia page. And I understand that anybody can put a Wikipedia page together, but it says born March 17th. Was that right?
Patrick's Day, yeah.
And your middle name is Patrick, it said.
Yeah.
I apologize that this is creepy, but
No, it's all good.
So part of what we were going to ask was, were you destined to go to Notre Dame the whole time? Like, was your family you went to Ignatius. Is your family a Catholic family? So
yeah, they're Catholic. There's actually a pretty crazy story about my family in Notre Dame. So my mom is one of 7. Her parents are from Ireland, as well as a couple of my aunts. They were born over there. Then a couple of them were born over in the States, including my mom. But when my grandfather came over from Ireland, he, obviously no education, nothing really to show, just came on over. And they said, if they hire the Irish at Notre Dame right now, if you need some work. So he went to Notre Dame, and they hired him as like a groundskeeper and a janitor. So he originally worked there for a little bit. And that was kind of the first time my family had an experience with Notre Dame. And then my cousin Jack went there. And it's just kind of been in our family. I wouldn't say I was like a super fan when I was younger by any means, but it's just been always in our family, just how important, the Catholic education is, as well as, having that academic challenge. That was always a really big deal for us. So that was definitely a big thing playing into it. But yeah, there's a lot of history with my family in Notre Dame. Yeah,
I'm kind of come from, I obviously did not get an athletic scholarship to go to Notre Dame, and I applied, and the ACT score wasn't quite high enough. But my claim to Notre Dame fame, and this was validated a little bit, I'll tell the story real quick, but my family owns a small business here in Ohio, and most of the buildings on Notre Dame's campus are made by bricks that my family somehow made. And
oh, nice.
My grandfather, my great-grandfather who started the business, and my grandfather, and then my dad's brothers and all of his cousins all went to Notre Dame. And a couple weekends back, it was for the Navy game. My uncle knows Coach Faust pretty well, and he's from the Akron area. And Coach Faust has a book out, and he had signed the book for my dad and sent it to my dad and talked about his fight and things. So I went up, and Coach Faust was in the bookstore, and I went up and I said to Coach Faust, like, thanks for writing that nice note and that book to my dad. He really appreciates it, blah, blah, blah. And he looks at me and he goes, "You're not a Belton, are you?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I am." And he said, "Well, I'll be darned." And he looks at all of the security people that are around him and goes, "This kid's family gave all the bricks to this university or whatever." And next thing you know, a couple of different people "Oh, wow, is this kid a big deal?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not a big deal. Like, maybe my great grandfather or something's a big deal." But so yeah, that's kind of cool to hear that, how it runs in the family with you, because I can definitely relate to that for sure.
Oh yeah.
I think if you were a big deal, they would have let you in.
You would think.
I mean, there's no way I was getting in without a little help. So let's be honest here.
That's all right. But
everyone needs some help sometimes.
Yeah.
I'll be a Subway alumni. That's fine.
And then you were obviously recruited by Charlie Weiss and Brian Kelly too when he was back at Cincinnati. What was the biggest difference between them? Because you did get a little bit of experience with Weiss before he was shown the door.
Yeah, just different styles, really. I wouldn't say Weiss was laid back by any means. I just think it was a different, get your work done mentality, while Coach Kelly is a little bit more in your face and a little bit more of a manager in that aspect, as far as like your daily routine. But both great coaches, and obviously have had success at all different levels.
Yeah, Coach Kelly's been successful just about anywhere he's gone. I mean, I saw his face on Grand Valley State stands when I went and played there last year when I was still playing football. Yeah. So he's really been successful everywhere. And just want to jump in here really quickly, but the top 25 was just released, and Notre Dame did stick at 4 with Iowa at 5 and Oklahoma State at 6, Oklahoma down at 7. Do you think Notre Dame's going to be able to find their way into the top 4, Dan?
Yeah, I do. I mean, if they just went out and do what you can control, I think they definitely deserve a spot in the top 4.
Does an undefeated, say like Big 12 team, does that scare you at all? Or are you in the boat that all Notre Dame has to do is win out and not even worry about anyone else and they'll be in? Because I'll be honest, it scares me just a little bit.
It does. Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's a tough call, honestly. But, I put Notre Dame up against any team in the country, and I'd take them. It's not like I don't think they're as good as anyone. I think they're the best team, if not, I mean, at least the top 4. So I think that is, as far as the committee's eyes, it's a tough call. But I still think that Notre Dame would be at least in the top 4, regardless of an undefeated Big 12 champ.
I would have to agree with you. I don't think the Big 12 is obviously quite as strong as some others do, and I think the committee kind of agrees with me there because they play no defense. They play one side of the ball, and I think defense will get you somewhere, even though Notre Dame's defense isn't as good as we all were hoping it would be. It's better than everyone else in the Big 12.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's what I don't know, a 2 cents that I'm going to put out there is that so I wrote an article kind of about this, about whether or not a Big 12 team is going to jump, and some of the feedback I got towards that article were people saying, like, I'm so sick of people saying that, like, Big 12 teams playing against other, like, quote-unquote top-notch Big 12 teams is a quality win. It's like the Big 12 could be complete garbage for all we know. And they're just ranked high because they're undefeated. Oklahoma looks really good, but they've only really beat other Big 12 teams. And to a certain extent, like, you can say that about all other conferences. I mean, Alabama's good, but they've only beat other SEC teams. Ohio State's good, but they've only beat other Big 10 teams. I think when you look at Notre Dame, and they've beaten teams from different conferences. They've beaten teams from East Coast, and hopefully by the end of the season, they have beaten USC, and hopefully they'll go out to the West Coast and beat Stanford.
Yeah.
I think that's something that no other team really anywhere can boast, and that's really impressive, and that's what makes Notre Dame is that they play, they're going to play in Boston this weekend and then turn right back around and then play on the complete other side of the country next weekend. And when you factor all that in, it's really hard to think of Notre Dame as a team that you can leave out of the college football playoff equation just because of that resume that they put together.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, they play the best of the best, so that's not a question as far as their strength of their schedule and who they play. But yeah, there is some question marks on some other conferences. That's for sure.
Yeah, and Ben touched upon the Shamrock Series upcoming this weekend at Fenway Park against Boston College. What was that whole experience like for you, getting to play at a neutral site in different years? I think you were at Cowboys Stadium one year, and I can't remember the other ones off the top of my head. I know Soldier Field another year, but what was that experience like?
Yeah, Soldier Field and Yankee Stadium, they're awesome places to play. It's just an awesome experience to be able to go to different venues like that. I would love to play in Fenway. It would have been awesome. But yeah, it's just an awesome experience to be able to do that in front of all the fans, like, because you get to see all the fans, in Boston and down in Dallas or whatever. There's fans all over the country for Notre Dame, so it's a different experience.
Yeah, I would have to think that would be one of the coolest things in the world, just getting to travel all over the country to play. And that's an awesome opportunity Notre Dame has that really no other school in the country has, because it's such a national fan base for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Yep. And then kind of wrapping up here, what are you up to personally these days?
Right now I'm down in Cincinnati. I was living with Tyler for about a year. I was just trying to play again after getting released by the Giants. I was trying to get picked up again. I was training down here. My agent knows a trainer down here in Cincinnati. So I've been living with Tyler and just training, but I actually took a job at Fidelity Investments, and I'm taking my Series 7 test to be like a registered stock or representative for, be a stockbroker. So I'm doing that in a little bit. And I'm pretty much done. I don't think I'm going to be playing football anymore. But yeah, it was a good run. It was fun. Got to, I made the roster in New York, and obviously an experience at Notre Dame that was unbelievable. So I'm really happy with my experience playing football.
Right, and you ended up with a Notre Dame education out of it. So there you go. That's more than
that was a good thing.
Else sitting on this podcast can say for sure.
Yeah, I guess the 4 for 40 years really does hold true here.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, even just my interviews were they were pretty funny, honestly. People would just start asking questions about football and Notre Dame, and all right, so when do you want to start?
That's awesome.
Is that how this works? But no, it was a great decision for me to decide to go there.
And how many times have you been back to campus since you've graduated?
I've been a bunch. I'm trying to think of the games I went to this year. I went to Texas, Navy, one more, USC. Went to those 3 this year. So I try to get back to a couple games a year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And then last question for you before we let you go. And this one's going to be a little strange, I'm not going to lie, but Ben and I found ourselves here on a previous podcast.
Okay.
Do you have any idea who Brian Kelly's favorite rapper is?
Favorite rapper?
Yes.
Oh, man. I feel like I should know that.
Well, while you think, let me give you a little backstory to this. So,
okay. Coach Diaco loves 50 Cent, so.
Yes.
I know for sure that's true.
On a previous podcast, right after the Temple game, Danny and I were talking, and I don't know if you saw College Game Day leading up to the Temple game, but they did a little segment on Temple coach Matt Rule, and somehow or another, and I forget how this relationship was formed, but he got young Jeezy to talk to the Temple football team, and Matt Rule's Twitter picture is a picture of young Jeezy holding up a Temple jersey and things. So when we were supposed to be talking about football, Danny and I probably we digressed 10 minutes into who we thought Brian Kelly's favorite rapper was. So that's where Danny's kind of odd question.
Who did you guys decide?
I think I went with Eminem. Ben, I'm not sure who you went with.
I posed Drake, but we kind of ruled him out because he's not intense enough for.
Yeah, I'm thinking he's from Boston, so I feel like it's got to be I don't know. I feel like Jay-Z'd be a solid pick, even though he's a New Yorker. I'd probably bet my life that he doesn't know a single Jay-Z song too. So, I don't know.
Yeah, we figured as much. We kind of figured he probably doesn't actually have one, but we'd figured we'd asked anyways.
That's funny.
All right, Dan. Well, we really appreciate you joining us tonight, taking the time out of your evening to talk some Notre Dame with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. Go Irish.
No problem.
Thanks for joining us.
See ya.
There you have it, Dan Fox jumping on the Campus Pressbox podcast. We really appreciate having him on. Definitely gave some great insight, and it was really cool to be able to talk about some previous memories and walk down memory lane to that magical 2012 season.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Hearing some of those stories, putting another perspective on it from a player's point of view was something I appreciate. Hopefully we can continue to bring on some players here in the future, get in touch with some other guys. So that was really cool. I'm happy we got the chance to do that.
And before we go here, the newest rankings did just come out. The top 4 has not changed. It's still Clemson at 1, Alabama at 2, Ohio State at 3, and Notre Dame at 4. A little bit of a surprise for me is Oklahoma is only at 7. I think that really bodes well for Notre Dame because they just had a huge win and they only moved up to 7 after beating the number 16. I think that really bodes well for the Irish.
Yeah, and what did you say Oklahoma State was just behind Oklahoma?
Oklahoma State is 6, Iowa is 5th.
Oh, okay.
The Sooners are 7th. And I will look for the rest.
All right. Yeah, I'm a little bit encouraged by that. Talked a little bit about how the Big 12s, all the Big 12's big wins are against Big 12 opponents, and the Big 12 opponent that Notre Dame played this year was obviously Texas, and they blew them out. And when you look at Oklahoma, they lost to Texas. And when you look at Oklahoma State, they probably should have lost to Texas. So I imagine that's kind of what the committee's thinking about at this point, and why Notre Dame is still stayed in there. I didn't necessarily expect this week to be the week that a Big 12 team got in if it was going to happen. I think all eyes are going to be on that Oklahoma State Bedlam game, which I believe is in Stillwater, if I remember correctly. And I don't know. I think that game will have some bearing, but at the same point, I don't know that even though Stanford lost to Oregon, I don't know that if Notre Dame wins against Stanford in conjunction with that game, I don't know that if both of those things happen, that one of those teams finds a way to jump Notre Dame. That's what I would like to think happens at least. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
yeah, and I'll feed you the rest of the top 10. Oklahoma's 7th, as I said. Florida comes in at 8th. Sparty is at 9, and Baylor drops to 10. And Stanford is just outside the top 10 at number 11. Also worth noting that USC has found their way into the top 25. They're sitting at 24, and Navy is up to 16. So a win over the Cardinal in a couple of weeks would give Notre Dame 3 victories over current top 25 teams. So I think if they win out, they're in. I really do. I don't think that the Big 12 is going to have a shot at this as long as Notre Dame keeps winning.
In the meantime, I think I'm still going to be rooting for the insurance policy of Michigan State, and maybe even North Carolina, because I don't think if Clemson lost, I don't think that hurts Notre Dame. Clemson is Clemson. Even if they lose, I don't think that hurts Notre Dame at all. So if UNC wants to go ahead and knock Clemson off, by all means, go for it. But yeah, I must admit that hearing those rankings and where those guys are, because it's not just Notre Dame that's in front of them. There's also Iowa also. So yeah, I'm encouraged by these rankings for sure.
And I'm definitely going to be putting my Notre Dame fandom aside at noon on that day before the day they play Stanford, and really, really rooting for Harbaugh, and Michigan, because I think if they can pull that one out, that would really throw this whole thing into a frenzy, and a win over Stanford would for sure lock the Irish in.
Yes, I agree with you. And maybe even if Michigan State is able to knock off Ohio State, I think you and I are in agreement that we don't really think that's going to happen, but certainly crazier things have happened. So Michigan State's one loss is really bad because Nebraska just is not very good. So yeah, we'll see what happens for sure. Also kind of got to hope that whoever does come out of Michigan State, Michigan, and Ohio State beats Iowa then to make that, insurance policy worth anything. But yeah, again, I just keep coming back to it. I'm really encouraged by this.
And the committee chairman, Jeff Long, was quoted as saying, Notre Dame remains strong at number 4. So I have to think that there's a lot of space in between them and number 5, Iowa, 6, Oklahoma State, and 7, Oklahoma. So have to think a win over Stanford would be huge that last week.
And it's not, I talked about this in my article a little bit, that Stanford kind of ruined Notre Dame's strength of schedule a little bit. It's no longer a play-in game. And when I say ruined, I use that lightly because, it's not like Stanford went out and lost to a 500 football team. Oregon isn't the same Oregon, but at the same time, they're still Oregon. So, and it's not like they went and got blown out either. Oregon's, I believe, now 7-3, and I'm assuming probably around the top 25 at least now. I don't know if they got in or what the deal was. It really doesn't matter. I'm just going to keep saying it. I'm encouraged. I feel a lot better than I did maybe about a week ago at this time.
Yeah, I'm very happy with the results of the top 25 tonight. I truly am. And hopefully it sticks like this. And to touch upon what you said, Oregon is ranked number 23, and they've really turned their season around after kind of hitting a pretty big valley after falling to Michigan State on the road and then losing a couple other games. But they've really turned their season around, and it's hard to duplicate a season like they had last year after you lose the guy. I mean, Mariota was a Heisman winner, and most Heisman winning, if you lose a Heisman winner, especially at the quarterback position, you usually don't win more than 6 or 7 games the following year because it's such a drop off. For them to be where they're at now, I think it really shows how strong of a program that is.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, being as dominant as they were, of course there was going to be a little drop off, especially early in the season. That happens plenty of times to teams that play in the national championship. There's a little bit of a I don't know, I'll just call it a hangover for lack of a better term from one season to the next, and I think Oregon was a victim of that. And I think that going forward, they've really rebounded, like you said, and I think they'll end up being a threat in the next couple of years. So hopefully that's something that the committee is taking into consideration. Obviously, Stanford didn't drop very far, I think from like 7 to 11. So as far as losing a game and dropping goes, that's not really a significant drop. So they must view that loss as not being real terrible.
Also worth noting that as of right now, Navy would have the group of 5 New Year's 6 bid. They are the highest ranked group of 5 team, coming in at 16, ahead of Houston at 19 and Memphis at 21.
Does Navy play Houston? Do you know?
I believe they would play them in. I do believe they would play. They do play actually the last week of the season, and then I think the winner of that would go on and play Temple in the AAC title game, which would essentially decide the bid for that. But what could be crazy is Navy could just about lock up a bid if they would win the AAC, but then they've got to come back the next week and play another game against Army.
Yeah, that
could really
strange.
throw this whole thing off if the Cadets could find a way to beat Navy or whatever Army is. Yeah,
I don't know. Well,
all right. Do you have anything else?
I think that's it for me. I think we touched on some good stuff.
All right, Ben, where can everyone find you?
Recently, I've changed Twitter a little bit. You can now find my Twitter where I tweet at bbelden330. Had to think about that for a second. And then you can find my writing on campuspressbox.com.
And I'm Danny Cunningham. You can find me on Twitter at dcunninghamcle. You can find my writings if you're into the Cleveland Indians on Burning River Baseball. You can find my Notre Dame stuff on campuspressbox.com. And I also like to thank Dan Fox for joining us tonight. You can find him on Twitter at dpfoxy. Be sure to give him a follow. He's inching towards 10,000. I'm sure he'd love to hit that. So throw him a follow, make that follow button turn blue, just as you should on Ben and I. But until next time, we appreciate you listening, and be sure to come back for more Campus Press Box.